Is it true that we need to drink 8 or more glasses of water per day? We've all heard this advice, but I've never actually seen any evidence to back it up. So I decided to do some digging. I found a lot of interesting science on hydration and health, although it doesn't really point to 8 glasses of water specifically. So for example, there are several studies on cancer and heart disease, but the results are a little inconsistent. One study found that people drinking 5 or more glasses of water a day had lower risk of dying of coronary heart disease than people who drank 2 or less glasses a day. But another study found no association between water intake and risk of dying of heart disease or stroke. So even without getting into the experimental design, whether we can conclude cause and effect or not, there's some mixed evidence, and even the study that finds an association doesn't say anything about that 8 glasses range. As for cancer, I found one study where people drinking 6 or more glasses of water a day had lower risk of bladder cancer, although it was only statistically significant for smokers, current or past smokers. And other studies of the same type did not find a statistically significant association between hydration and bladder cancer. So again, inconsistency and nothing pointing to that 8 glasses range anyway. I also found some studies for colorectal cancer, but they're all case control studies, which is an even weaker experimental design. Case control basically means you take a group of people with diagnosed cancer and a group without cancer, and they are similar in some parameters, and then you look at their water drinking habits and you try to establish an association. But there's no real statistical adjustment for a lot of potential confounders. It's good for hypothesis generation, but it's a long way from actually establishing cause and effect. Now, for effects of hydration on skin health, I found a bit more research. There's this idea that drinking more water makes us look younger and less tired. So on this idea, there are some studies, and they're interventional. So the investigators actually go in and tell people to drink more water and see what happens. So that's pretty cool. So one of those studies asked people to drink an extra liter of water a day, which is around 4 glasses of water. And they did see some improvements in skin hydration, and the subjects also reported that their skin felt smoother and softer. Several limitations of this study. One, they chose people that had a dehydrated skin to begin with. 2, there was no control group. They just told everybody to drink more water. And number 3, they didn't report how much water people were drinking before the study or how much water overall they drank during the study. So it doesn't really help us with our 8 glasses a day question. So a lot of loose ends, a lot of question marks with this study, but the results suggest that for people who are dehydrated, who don't drink a lot, drinking a bit more water, increasing water intake might improve some skin properties. A couple other trials asked people to add 2 extra liters of water to their normal water intake. So 2 liters is about 8 glasses. And they report some improvements in skin hydration. Unfortunately, they also didn't have a control group. But in this trial, they actually figured out that the improvements in skin hydration depended on how much water people were getting before the trial. So some of their participants drank less before in their normal lives, an average of 3.5 glasses of water a day before the trial. And some of their participants drank more, an average of 5.5 glasses of water. And everybody was told to increase their regular water intake by 8 glasses. And by and large, they only saw the improvements in the group that drank less to begin with. The group that was drinking more before the trial saw virtually no benefit with increased hydration. So again, some methodological issues that limit our confidence level, but the results of this trial suggest that the critical amount of water intake, at least for skin health, might actually be between 3.5 and 5.5 glasses of water a day, ballpark. And that once you're at 5.5, increasing your water intake even further might not provide much additional benefit. Also really interesting, in these skin studies, there was no significant change in other health parameters like blood pressure or heart rate when people increased their hydration. It was only the skin metrics that changed. So overall, so far, Not a ton of evidence, definitely not the most rigorous in terms of experimental design, and nothing really pointing to that 8 glasses a day range being critical. In fact, several experts in a number of published pieces recommend just going with your thirst, just drinking when you're thirsty and not obsessing over trying to get more water or trying to shoot for a specific amount. Now, there are some special situations where it might make sense to try to drink more. If you exercise a lot, obviously you're going to lose more water, so you need to increase intake. Similarly, if you live somewhere where it's warm, in fact, if you're outside working or exercising in the sun, you'll lose water very fast. So it's a good idea to hydrate in advance, even before you feel thirsty. Also, some special life stages. If you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, obviously you're going to need more water. Sometimes in children and older individuals, thirst isn't very effective. For example, the thirst reflex is known to go down with age. Although I did find one study looking at people 70 years old or older, and most of them reported drinking 6 glasses of water a day or more, and there was no evidence of dehydration or any health issue related to not drinking enough. So it's case by case. Some illnesses also justify drinking more water. For example, if you have diarrhea or if you're vomiting, if you have kidney stones, or if you're at risk for kidney stones, for example, if you have a family history, you definitely want to drink more water. We have a recent video all on kidney stones where we went over this issue of hydration. I'll share a personal example. Polycystic kidney runs in my family. We all have something, right? Either it's heart disease or cancer or something. We have this, ADPKD, autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease. It's a mouthful. It's a genetic disease where cysts slowly grow in your kidneys over the years, and by the time you hit 60 or something like that, you need a kidney transplant. Now, some things seem to speed up cyst growth and some things seem to slow it down. And drinking a lot of water might be one of the factors that slows down cyst growth. Our hypothalamus in the brain produces this hormone called vasopressin, and vasopressin stimulates the kidney to grow cysts. But turns out that drinking water suppresses vasopressin. So I drink a lot of water for that reason. A lot more than the 8 glasses a day, actually. About twice that. So that's a super specific example. Obviously, I have nothing personal against drinking a lot of water for people who want to do it or for people who may need to do it. But have I seen evidence that we should be telling everyone to go make an effort to drink 8 glasses a day? I haven't seen it. Out of curiosity, let me know in the comments how much water you normally drink on a regular day. There's a recent study that looked at water intake across 26 countries, and they found massive variation between different people, with some people drinking several times more water than others. So curious to hear what your experience is. Okay, other situations where extra hydration can help. It can help prevent UTIs, urinary tract infections. So for people with recurrent UTIs or at risk of UTIs, worth considering increasing your water intake. And it can help with chronic constipation as well. Okay, what about weight loss? Can drinking more water help us lose weight? There's some really fascinating research on this topic. So it seems that our energy expenditure, the amount of calories we burn, actually goes up right after we drink water. So one study had the participants drink half a liter of water, so that's about 2 glasses of water, and their energy expenditure went up over the next hour or so. So they were burning more calories. Their metabolism was revved up by like 24%, so pretty significant. And these people were sitting down. The investigators were observing them the whole time. So it's not like they were moving around more or anything like that. So it's a metabolic effect. Now, this is a really interesting result, but it's short term, right? So does it actually sustain over the long run? Does it actually lead to any weight loss? We always need to be careful with these acute metabolic observations. So some other studies looked at actual food intake, and when participants drink water before meals, they end up eating less. So that's something I imagine a lot of people have noticed anecdotally. Definitely works for me. If I drink a bottle of water, I'm full for like an hour or two. In one study, for example, they had people drink 300 milliliters of water before a meal. So that's a little over 1 glass. And people ended up eating 24% less food than the control group that didn't drink before the meal. Interestingly, they both reported feeling about equally satiated, even though one group had just eaten 24% less calories, presumably because all the water helped fill them up. Now, is this effect sustained over weeks or months? Some studies did try to keep this up over a longer period to see what happens, and drinking half a liter of water before each meal, so 3 times a day, half a liter before breakfast, half a liter before lunch, and half a liter before dinner every day, did lead to an additional weight loss, about 1 to 2 extra kilos lost over a couple months. So that's about 2 to 5 pounds. Not the biggest weight loss I've ever seen, but pretty impressive if you consider it doesn't cost anything and doesn't really have any downsides. Now, I have seen at least one study where they didn't find this effect. I've also seen more than one where they did, so there might be some variation there, but it sounds like something that's worth bearing in mind for people who are trying to moderate their caloric intake and lose some extra fat. Okay, another study around this topic as well, and this one is pretty incredible. It was conducted in Germany, and they installed water fountains in elementary schools and also taught the kids classes about the importance of hydration. And this was a randomized trial, so they had a number of schools, they split them randomly. Some schools got this program, the water fountains plus the classes. Some schools got no intervention. And over a year, kids that got the intervention did increase their water intake by an average of 1 glass of water a day, and their risk of obesity dropped by 31%. To me, this result, when I saw it, was so surprising. It's one of those results you almost want to see it replicated before you completely believe it, because it's almost too good to be true. So, some really interesting stuff on the weight loss angle and some things to try out on an individual basis. Another common question is headaches. People struggling with migraines, and does drinking more water help? So there's one trial where they took people suffering from migraine and they had them drink an extra liter of water a day. And the total time and intensity of the headaches seemed to come down, although it didn't reach statistical significance. Now, it was a very small trial. It's theoretically possible that if they had more people, larger trial, they might see a significant effect. So something to bear in mind for people struggling with headaches, something to maybe if people want to give it a shot, since it doesn't really have any downsides. Another important thing to point out is replacement. We've been talking about drinking water on top of normal consumption, about adding more water. But if water is consumed instead of soda, for example, or alcohol, then we could be talking about a very significant benefit in terms of calories and beyond, in terms of overall health. Now, are there any risks of drinking more water? There is something called water toxicity, where people can get hyponatremia, basically a low level of sodium in the blood, which can cause nausea, confusion, seizures if it's extreme. As you might imagine, this is rare. It happens in specific circumstances. For example, if there's an underlying health issue, like the kidneys not functioning properly, for example, and not being able to excrete normal amounts of water. Or sometimes with endurance athletes, like triathlon, they drink large amounts of water, they lose a lot of sodium through their sweat, and so sometimes we see it in those cases. Otherwise, not really a concern for the average citizen on a normal day who wants to drink 8 glasses or 10 glasses or 15 glasses of water. You'll just go to the bathroom a lot. Another important realization is that fluid intake doesn't just come from drinking water. We get a lot of water from our food. Vegetables obviously have a lot of water. Watermelon, for example, is 91% water. Lettuce is 95%. But even meat or eggs are over 70% water. So we end up getting substantial fluids from food as well. As for other drinks, there's an idea that some drinks don't count for hydration, like coffee. That coffee dehydrates us, and so it doesn't count as water intake. It is true that coffee in larger amounts, like several cups, has a diuretic effect. So we could wonder if that leads to dehydration. But this effect is only seen in people who are not regular coffee drinkers. It's an acute effect. There's a fairly quick habituation process over days or weeks, and people develop tolerance. So the diuretic effect is not seen in regular coffee drinkers. Studies looking at regular coffee drinkers have found no significant difference between water and coffee in urine volume or other metrics of hydration in serum or in urine. And at smaller doses, about 1 cup, there's no diuretic effect detectable, even in people who are not habituated, who are not regular drinkers. And even for some alcoholic drinks, which alcohol has this reputation of making us urinate, of being a diuretic, but even there, it depends on the type and the amount. One study gave people 1 alcoholic beer or 1 non-alcoholic beer or just water and saw no significant difference in urine output. Now, of course, regular consumption of alcohol is not recommended for other reasons, so wouldn't encourage people to go drink a bunch of beer to get their water in, but not necessarily because of dehydration. There are some other really common questions and myths. For example, this idea that by the time we feel thirst, it's already too late. We're already dehydrated. This idea doesn't really seem to be supported by the evidence. Studies have looked at this specifically, and people seem to get thirsty and drink before there are any fluid deficits detected or any changes in blood parameters that would indicate dehydration. So once again, this seems to support the idea that our sense of thirst seems to do the job okay, at least for healthy individuals in normal circumstances. Older individuals, outdoor activities in the sun, intense physical activity, we've talked about those exceptions. Another common idea is that our urine has to be very clear, has to be the color of water or very pale yellow, otherwise we're dehydrated. This one is a bit slippery because what's light urine, what's dark urine, it's subjective, depends a bit who you ask. But some brave and curious researchers did look into this, and they collected urine and they describe it as moderately yellow, which might be interpreted as dark when contrasted against pale yellow or clear. And these volunteers with this moderately yellow urine, not pale yellow, had serum parameters that were in the normal range and nowhere near what's considered meaningful dehydration. So they conclude in pretty strong wording that the idea that dark urine reflects dehydration is alarmist and false in most instances. So it is true that the color of urine will correlate with our hydration state, and someone who is dehydrated will have small volumes of urine. It'll be darker, it'll be more concentrated, but having it super pale or water-like doesn't appear necessary. Now, after I went over all the evidence I found, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. So I wanted to double check with somebody with expertise in this area. So I asked Dr. David Goldfarb, who we had on the channel very recently. He's the chief of nephrology at NYU, and he teaches kidney physiology to the NYU medical students. And here's what he said. There is no real support for 8 glasses of water a day, or any other number, for the non-stone former. So he doesn't prescribe a specific water intake for non-stone formers, for most people. Now, for stone formers, for people with kidney stones, he recommends 3 liters a day, which is 96 ounces, about 12 glasses a day. And he explains that this is a prescription for urine output, really. So if it's a hot day or you're sweating more, you might need a bit more than 3 liters to get the equivalent urine output because you'll lose more through your sweat. Now, for people who do want to increase their water intake or need to do it, stone formers or something like that, I have a super simple system that I use that is very effective. I don't know if you can see that. I put some paper clips on my water bottle, and the number on there is the number of bottles of water that I want to drink in a day. And very simple, when I finish a bottle, I just flip the clip to one side, and it's basically a counting system. So I know at all times by looking at that how many bottles of water I already had, and I know how many I have to go. So by doing this, I basically doubled my water intake overnight. It's a very simple but very effective accountability system and a constant reminder. Okay, so if there's no compelling evidence for this 8 glasses a day story, where does this come from? I mean, it's so pervasive. We've all heard it. It seems to stem from some dietary recommendations from 1945. And they suggested 2 to 2.5 liters a day, which is in that ballpark of 8+ glasses. But they didn't present any evidence to support that recommendation. And also, they explained in that document that most of the water intake is contained in food. So you don't actually need to drink all those 2 or 2.5 liters. They also say water should be allowed ad libitum, so as much as one wants. And sensations of thirst usually serve as adequate guides to intake, except for infants and sick people. So this isn't in alignment with everything else we saw. So bottom line, I don't see a reason for most people to obsess over this and add one more worry to their lives. For people who do want to drink 8 glasses of water a day or more, I don't see a problem. There are so many dangerous fads in nutrition out there, people doing all kinds of crazy stuff because they heard it on the internet. This is one trend I don't mind seeing. I don't want to discourage a Western population from drinking a little bit more water, especially if it replaces some soda or some alcohol. Main takeaway is that your water needs are going to vary depending on who you are, your body size, your age, where you live, and what you do. 8 glasses a day might not be enough for some people, and it might be too much for others. Hope that helps. Let me know your questions below. I'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.